I also understand you used this word earlier. This is a book about stewardship, and it is a book dedicated to librarians. And so much of this book is about the immortality of text, but also the ways generations will take responsibility for this immortality. Could you talk about how, just you dedicated this to the librarians? How does the idea and your experience with the library, how did it inform this novel?
Yeah, such a nice question. Really well said. So mom was a science teacher, and she taught high school and was tired a lot. And I didn't realize that, of course, as a kid. Me and my older brothers were always just bothering her, I think. But she was an amazing mom, and she would drive us often on the way home from school. She would leave us, drop us at the library, and probably grade papers or figure out how to feed us. And I had two older brothers and wanted desperately to keep up with them in all ways. And so I often would just try to keep up with their reading tastes or whatever they were borrowing. But the library really became a third place for us between home and school, a place of total safety and exploration and discovery, really. I mean, if you think about it, it's a total miracle. You get to go take some public property and take it home and like spill chocolate milk on it, and and of course I take home Peanuts comics or Calvin and Hobbes comics or stuff, that was appropriate for my reading age. But sometimes I'd also bring home Paul Bowles is the example that I usually give. Like I brought home The Sheltering Sky when I'm like 12 years old. There's like murder and hashish smoking, and I don't even understand half the stuff that's going on in it. But the fact that nobody tells you no, and that you get to take it home and have it in your bed, like you get to experience and smell this book and learn how to care for public property. It's such an incredible gift. And when you're a kid, you think libraries are just like a writer series like this. You think these things just exist, and like leaves on trees or like winter. And then it's not until you become an adult, and really for me, it's embarrassingly late into my adulthood, that I realize it's humans that are making these things happen. Humans are funding them. Humans are keeping them building them, and refitting them when the roof leaks, and giving them a budget to buy new books and to kind of steward the collective human wisdom so that it's available for people. Public libraries are our last public indoor space, especially in the winter, somewhere like Traverse City, Michigan, where it gets cold. Like there's not a lot of places a person can go and stay warm and use the bathroom and use the internet if we don't have public libraries. So there's such vital nexuses in our communities. And I just wanted to ask questions all through the novel about destruction and erasure on one side and preservation and conservation on the other, and whether that means the preservation of our shared planet and the other species with which we share this planet, or human culture and human stories. And you realize that the only, like that 75% statistic I gave you earlier, the only reason those stories survived, the only reason maybe we have certain texts by Plato or certain plays by Euripides, is because one schoolmaster one day decided not to scrape it, but to preserve it, to decide to recopy it. So I wanted to dramatize that one little action. You never know what one little action like Anna takes, and then later Zeno and Seymour take, how those actions will reverberate down through time.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and the whole book, I mean, page by page, is a tribute to libraries and librarians. Speaking of libraries, there was a question, and perhaps you've addressed this somewhat, but I think this is more specified toward your own work. The Traverse Area District Library asked, in thinking about where you started and who you are now as a writer, how did libraries contribute to the process? So you've been talking about the idea of stewardship and what libraries do for humanity. What about what libraries did for, Tony Doerr, writer?
Yeah.
Writer in training.
Oh my gosh. So, I grew up in a place maybe not that unlike Traverse City, where, I grew up in rural Ohio. My dad worked in Cleveland, so I say Cleveland a lot, but we were 45, 50 minutes away. And Dad ran a little printing company that made stickers, and my mom was a teacher, so we didn't have tons of money. And the house wasn't necessarily full of books, but it was full of library books. His dad would get like the Spencer for Hires or like these spy thrillers out. And Mom was always had so many books to help her teach. She was like reading Rachel Carson and Aldo Leopold and Edward Abbey, all these environmental writers she loved so much, and Annie Dillard. So our home was always just full of curiosity, I think. And that was only due really to the library. And then as it's not like maybe I think you can probably relate, Leslie. It's not like we had writers over for dinner or like I was being taken to the writers, the National Writers Series. Like I didn't. I thought writers lived in Paris or were dead, basically. So I think the fact that you could go study the work of masters for free was so compelling to me, even though I was way too shy to ever tell anybody. It would have seemed too pretentious and scary to me to say, I would like to be a writer. I was imitating work really early. I was, borrowing my mother's typewriter and writing stories about my toys. And I think that's all kind of due to my exposure to stories at the library. And then as I get older, I remember this is just occurring to me now with that question is when I finally got into graduate school. The only graduate school I got into with any kind of funding was Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And I rented an apartment, I think it was for $400 a month above a garage. It was about a mile from campus, but it was really close to the public library in Bowling Green. And I didn't know anything about the professors there. So I walked over to the public library and got Wendell Mayo's book out of the public library, who was going to be teaching my class in a week. I was like unpacking my pillow. I think I made $12,000 that year or whatever. You have no money, barely enough money to eat. So the library just helped me understand like who were my teachers going to be. And I remember like the power of the National Book Award sticker on like a book. You're like, well, this must be really special. I'm going to take this one home and give it a try. Something so amazing about that. And now I think it's wonderful that something like filmmaking, the phone has allowed my kids to explore that art making without having to have a couple $1,000s. But when we were kids, you couldn't go make films without money. And yet I feel like writing and drawing, of course, are such democratic art forms because all you really need to do is be able to feed yourself and maybe buy $5 worth of paper and get a pencil and you can write. It's kind of beautiful. We're all using these free structures that are words, these used and abused structures of language that we all share to try to make things. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. Gosh, I hope what you just said will be like put on YouTube and played over and over because it's such a wonderful advocacy for the library.